Hello, we're here today. I'm Bill Ramsey, a part of the leadership team of the 7th Annual Blue Ridge Book Festival, hosted here at Blue Ridge Community College in the spring of each year. And we're here today with an honored author, a local author, Jeremy B. Jones. His book, Bear Wallow, which happens to be the name of a local mountain, is a personal history of his mountain homeland. That's where he was grown up as a boy. The publisher on this book is John F. Blair Publishing, and they do a good job for authors like Jeremy, and we're glad to have you here today.
Thanks for having me.
Well, it's a real pleasure for us. Jeremy started with an MFA in nonfiction writing at the University of Iowa, and is now in the English department at Western Carolina University, a family tradition that goes back many years to, I guess, your grandmother having...
That's right, when it was Western Teaching College.
So, and it's Western has changed a lot. It's no longer a teaching college, although they probably still teach educators there, but that's not its sole mission. It's grown dramatically. We're glad to have you here.
Thank you.
Let's start with the explanation of the title. A Personal History of a Mountain Homeland is the subtitle. And one of the things that I found refreshing in reading the book is that it's much more than a personal memoir. Memoirs can be mind-numbingly boring, particularly if you're not a family member of the person who wrote the memoir, and sometimes even then. But this is much more a report about the situation that you grew up in. Can you tell us more what inspired this book in the first place?
Yeah, I mean, so one of the subtitles that we considered but ultimately rejected, although I liked it, was a memoir of place. And I feel like this is much more a book about place than it is necessarily just about me. But one of the events that opens the book is this moment when I'm in college.
It's the book there.
That's the book.
Right.
And I'm not living in the mountains anymore, and someone stops to help me. My car's broken down. And when I tell him where I'm from, he identifies me as mountain folk, and goes on to say that mountain folk are good people, which is a compliment, I think. But to me, as I thought about that statement over and over, it was an odd just notion that someone could be shaped by a place and made to be anything, made to be good or bad or whatever. So the book more or less opens with that scenario, but really that was the question sort of driving me as I was writing it too. If I'm mountain folk, what does that mean about me? Am I shaped in any way by the place that I'm from and where my family has been for over 200 years? And I didn't know. I couldn't really look at myself and say, yes, that makes me a mountain person. So that's what I set out to answer in the book.
Well, I've lived here since 1989, and I think even later in life one can be shaped by a place, and I absolutely believe in that. But it's interesting, you were down on the Carolina coast when that observation was made, is that correct?
Kind of in the middle of the state, but I was at Elon University, which is in North Carolina, but I think only like 25% of the students come from North Carolina, and a lot of them are from the Northeast, so it almost felt like I was in a different place altogether in college. And then to be identified, sort of pointed out as mountain people was just curious to me.
Yeah, and you don't even talk funny.
Well, I maybe talked a little funnier then, but yeah, I don't know. That's part of the book, is a sort of realization that I worked to lose my accent, and then I kind of regretted it. I kind of, there was so much stereotype attached to it, so much stigma when I was a younger person. And now that I've come back home and I can't use the word reckon anymore naturally or fluently, I feel like I've kind of lost something, and it's a little bit sad. And so it's fun being back at Western, where a lot of students are from the region, to try to instill some pride in this place that maybe I didn't realize, not that I wasn't given that maybe, but I didn't realize that I should have pride in the place that I'm from then.
Jeremy has just joined us on the set here from a panel of 3 historians that we featured at the Book Fest in the previous hour, so you're hot off a success with that panel discussion. But one of the things that folks observing this may not know is that there is an abundance of folks who write one way or another about local history. They write fictional history or historic fiction, or in your case, a kind of a memoir with your life being the thread through the story. But I'm sure you've met and enjoyed the conversations you've had with many local history writers.
Yeah, it's a place rich in history, and that's one thing that surprised me, because it's also Southern Appalachia in particular is often stereotyped as being fairly homogenous and having this sort of singular history of it being an isolated place. And it's not that at all. Once you pull back the thread a little bit, you find there's a whole tangled mess of history in there that's really, really interesting to explore.
It is. And it's being preserved smartly, I believe, because
Yep.
I think it's an important part of who we have been and who we are yet to be
Yep.
in this area. You were born in 1981. I was born in 1942. I hate to admit that. I wanted to have some color in my hair, but couldn't get to the drugstore in time.
At least you still got here.
Your family, and you've got photos to prove it, goes back, what, 4 generations to the late 1880s or some such?
So further than that, one of the first settlers in Henderson County was Abraham Kirkendall, who would have been my 6th greats of a grandfather. And he settled here in 1785. So a long stretch. Yeah.
And tell us something about where they located and what some of them did.
Yeah, Kirkendall's known because a lot of people descended from him because he was here, and at one point owned most of Flat Rock because he was one of the first people here. My grandmother's family, my mother's mother's family, are the Maxwell family, and they settled more in the Edneyville side of things where I grew up, and have been there since just the turn of the 19th century. It was curious to me when I was looking back at the history how bizarre it was that everyone stayed put for so long, because so many people left, especially when the railroad came in and mill jobs opened up and people went to find other jobs. There have been a lot of reasons to leave, but for some reason, all the branches of my family tree stayed rooted, and I sort of was the result of that. Then it was weird, when I was a kid, and not a kid, but a teenager, and I knew that I wanted to leave. I knew that I wanted to get away. To then, a few years later, realize I just wanted to go back. I wanted to be reattached. I felt kind of dissected a little bit. And now that I'm back here, probably for good, I just moved back this summer, something feels right about that. Nearly, I guess as those Scots-Irish Presbyterians would have said, nearly predestined about coming back to a place where your family's been for so long.
Let's talk about your boyhood, because I was once a boy myself, and it was a joyous time in life. And I thought some indication of your future as a writer was seen in the book, in the way you described the sounds, the seasons, the crops, the mountain views, and particularly your bicycle rides. Mm-hmm. Would you tell us about what a Saturday afternoon was like back then?
Yeah, when I was a kid, I admitted this. I was in Tennessee last week and talking to a group of high schoolers, and one of them admitted he didn't like to read. This was a writing class,
oh, yeah.
And I told him that he had to read if he wanted to write. But I admitted that I wasn't a very good reader as a child because I preferred to be outside. I would much rather be outside doing something than reading. And it wasn't until college that I realized my love for reading. But my family's land is right in the middle of a forest, and I was probably more animal than child because I was in the forest more often than in the house. And so when I graduated and moved off to college, yeah, and I started road biking there, started cycling. So then when I would come back home, that was my way of sort of exploring again. It was riding those winding roads of Edneyville and Fruitland, and it was a history lesson for me because it was a slowed down version of that place that I'm usually in a car going 40, 50 miles an hour, to be going hopefully at least 15 or 20 on a bike. Really slows down the scenery, and I started seeing things in kind of a slideshow almost of land, and I just realized how beautiful it was once I went away and came back. And then, of course, it provided me the history lesson of going up to the top of Bear Walla, finding a connection there, and then ultimately finding it to be a place that was soon to be changed by an incoming residential development.
We'll get to that in just a minute, but I want to bear down one more time on this power of observation, because you said things slowed down, and I believe in today's world, too many of us are just doing what I call careening through life.
Yeah.
And you can't write anything of real value, I think, if you can't see it and experience it first. So you've got that power.
Yeah, and it was interesting to realize how much was sort of pushed back in my brain when I sat down to write this book, and all of those things. If you sit with memories long enough, they start kind of coming to the surface, and all of those details, the smell of the giant rhododendron, patches beyond the house really started coming into my olfactory system or whatever when I sat down to write this book. So it's curious how those things are stored away and could be drawn back up.
Absolutely. You alluded to the changes that began to happen in the development of Bear Wallow Mountain when the Grand Highlands of Bear Wallow was first announced. Would you describe the changes that began at that time?
Yeah, for me, Bear Wallow, even though I didn't start cycling up it until I was 21 or so.
You'd always looked at it as a youth, though,
yeah,
from afar.
I had this sort of myth about it from down in the valley, and then when I started actually going up to the peak, I don't know if anyone hasn't been up there, it's worth going because you get nearly a 360-degree view. It's this beautiful bald peak, but for me, the attachment was this kind of silence up there. There are just a couple of houses. It's mostly grazing land, pasture land. And it almost, I mean, not to be too exaggerated, but it felt nearly like Eden. I mean, everything was just sort of quiet and still. So it was my connection to the place. And so then when I came back some years later and found, coming back up it for the first time, that it was being prepared, there were stakes in the ground with lot numbers for a high-end development. I think the plan originally was to put about 300 houses on a little over 400 acres. So to really kind of pack it in with houses, it was unsettling, for my connection back to a place. And a lot of things have happened in the broader sense of the economy, so it hasn't moved along maybe as quickly as they intended, and hasn't changed as dramatically as it once was going to, but it's still, they're still building houses, so it still could change.
And trees were removed, and
some trees. I mean, because it's a bald, it's
right.
pretty open, and they, I don't know how much of this was rhetoric. I think that some of it was true. The Grand Highlands told me a number of times they intended to keep as much as they could the shape of the mountain intact and sort of build with it. They clearly couldn't do that on the ridges. When they started building houses up there, they had to move land around and change, kind of literally change the mountain. And pull up rocks, and they sort of said clean it up, was the language they used. But things had to be changed, but not as dramatically as they could be once all those houses show up.
We moved into this area in 1989, and had I known what it was like, I'd have gotten here a whole lot earlier. We love it here. Yeah. My sense of that time when this county was undergoing expansion in all directions was that people who'd lived here for a long time and enjoyed it must have felt a sudden surge and a kind of a compression, pressure coming in all around them that was coming from who knew where. Did you have people explain it to you that way, or? I
don't know. That's interesting to think about. I mean, for me, it's too easy to think of it in black and white terms, so I can look at things like that and sort of lament that they're happening. But I also know that the more open, all of the bringing in of people and cultures has also made me a much better, well-rounded person. And so the questions of how our land gets used are really way more complicated than we might like to believe, because we don't want to just, I don't think, make everything national park and not touch it, but we also want to probably not cover it up in so many houses that you can't even use the water table to supply water.
True.
So I think it's a really important moment, particularly in this county, where agriculture isn't, in Henderson, the part of Henderson County that I'm from, where agriculture is no longer the main job. What do we do with that land now? How do we use it? How do we protect it, other than just maybe filling it with houses?
Yes. After Elon, you went to Honduras. Mm-hmm. Explain that, please, and what you did while there.
I was teaching fourth grade in a little bilingual school at the foot of a cloud forest there. What I thought when I first left would be the most foreign place, and then after about 4 months there, suddenly realized it was a lot like home. And then I started realizing that, and long ago, those mountain chains were actually connected, and there was a historical connection to this place, and I could look around and go back to that question that I was asking myself about how am I mountain people. And I felt like I could look at the people there and say, these people are mountain people. I hear it in the way they talk. I see it in the way they react and interact. So I started finding way more connections to home than I expected in a very foreign place in a little rural town in Honduras.
And you were there how long?
I was there a little over a year.
Okay. And you came back to the school that you had studied in as a young boy. Yeah. And some of the teachers were still there.
All of my teachers were still there, which was kind of frightening because they were, I was nervous to walk into the teacher's lounge because I was afraid that, my third grade teacher would say, what are you doing here?
They knew you.
Yeah, you're just a kid. So they were K through 5, all of my teachers were still at work.
and you were assigned to a trailer, and much of what you taught was English to newly arrived
Yeah.
and people from Mexico, Honduras, Costa Rica, and perhaps other countries. I got from reading those passages in the book that one of the frustrations was that they would come and pretty quickly disappear again to be replaced by another. So you must have felt a start and stop, a start and stop, a start and stop quite frequently. And
yeah, and that's another interesting change in our county, is that for a long time, at least for the last 40 or 50 years, most of our agricultural work was done by migrant labor. So,
correct.
So mostly Latino people coming in and then leaving. And that's changing a little bit because people are coming in and staying. And so even when I was a child, I did experience that. I would have students I knew for a few months, and they would disappear, and we didn't know where they went. When I was teaching, a lot more students were staying, and it was an interesting role for me because I was sort of their ambassador. I was to welcome them to this place and help them connect. But it was a kind of existential moment for me because I wasn't sure how I connected moving back to the place too, and so I had to sort of sort out how good of an ambassador I could be. But it was really a thrilling thing to be able to see these students from a very different place start to find connections to this world that I felt so drawn to and connected to.
Some of what made your storytelling so rich was that you talked about how the Civil War split families. Give us a few words on that.
Yeah, that's a history that a lot of people, particularly people who have been here for a long time, don't like to talk about. There were over 200 men who fought for the Union from Henderson County. And in my family tree, I found a lot of them. In fact, one of the stories that was most interesting to me was of one of my great-great-great-grandfathers who was out in town, and some men from the Confederacy came to conscript his son. So they were going to take him off to fight. They were like 12 and 14, I think, at the time. And he got word of it, and he got on his horse, and he rode back. And he heard them coming, and so he got into the woods and jumped out with his horse and took a shot at him. Managed to hit one of them, and then took another shot and managed to shoot his own horse. So he wasn't maybe the most heroic or the best suited for that heroism. But it scared them enough. They thought that more men were coming, and they took off. And he managed to save his sons. And then a few days later, the oldest one joined the Union and went off to fight. So there just is even a much more complicated history in terms of Civil War. And for me, that's fascinating because this is a region where people identify as Southern, but we can't track that back to the Civil War necessarily. Like, our idea of Southernness has to be bigger than simply loyalty during the Civil War, because a lot of our ancestors weren't loyal to the South during the Civil War. So Southernness means lots of different things.
In fact, a lot of them had come down the mountain range
Right.
from the north,
Right.
and understandably would have northern sympathies
Right.
at least.
At least they wanted, and they mostly wanted to stay out of it. That was sort of the nature
Yes.
of people here. They wanted to just stay out, see what happened, and it, when the war came in, they couldn't do it anymore. Couldn't.
One of the things that you might also explain is the Scots-Irish, and I have to tell you, and I'm embarrassed to admit this, but I'm sure it's true for a lot of folks. Until I got down here and read about it, I always thought it was Scotch-Irish.
It's an accepted pronunciation. Yeah, you can do it both ways.
But Scots-Irish is just a little different, and maybe you could describe what that influence has been on your life and continues to be in this area.
Yeah, the continued influence is interesting because my wife and I had a son about 3 years ago, and my wife has dark hair, kind of darker complexion, and suddenly this redheaded kid appeared, and we didn't realize until we went to a family reunion on my mother's side that there were redheaded people everywhere in our family. They weren't me and they weren't my wife, so we were shocked. So that Scots-Irish, those genes were coming up. But yeah, so in the reign of King James, he pulled a lot of people from Scotland and also England and Wales into Ireland as a way to do a lot of things, to sort of increase his reign, to try to convert the Catholics to Protestantism. But then ultimately a lot of them left and moved here, and I think about 95% of those who left, those Scots-Irish people who left, settled in Appalachia. So there's a very strong contingent of them here. And by lots of descriptions, they were very fiery, sort of quick-tempered people, but people who wanted to be left alone, which is why they kind of came to the mountains. And so it's interesting to trace some of those characteristics into me and to people now and see if those things kind of carry on. That same kind of independence, that same kind of, unsurety of outsiders, but also resolve. It's just the genetic pool is really curious. Red hair or fieriness, like those things get passed down whether we know it or not.
The other thing that you did, among the many things that you did in this marvelous book, Bear Wallow, you honor local people. You called them out by name and described them in a kind of a richness. Talk about what inspired you to do that. Was it your Saturday trips to Henderson, the big town of Hendersonville,
Yeah.
or where did you encounter those folks?
Yeah, I mean, place is a really layered concept. At first, you think just of landscape, but then, of course, you have to think about culture and language and people. The people who are there make up a place. Probably the best experience after the book came out was that there was one woman who I wrote about, who I've known. She's essentially lives beside me when I was growing up, and I grew up with her sons. But she was a teacher at Edneyville. And I think I described her in the book, this might not be a direct quote, but as a woman who could kill a hog and know what to do with it the next day. And so when my book launched, she came to the reading carrying a little paper bag, and she said, "Jeremy, I killed a hog and I made sausage for you," and handed it to me. And that was probably the best moment of the time after the book came out, because it was sort of, in my mind, it was her saying, "You got me right. Like, that's true. I can do this." And all of the color, all of the kind of nuance that you get from learning people's connection to the places, all of the differences among people here who we often think of as just one thing. They're all love to watch NASCAR and shoot guns, but it's just not that way. And you have to start talking to people to figure those things out.
Yes, having gotten here as many years now ago as I have, I have come to know and recognize some of these folks and families that have been here forever, and the huge contribution they make, sometimes very quietly,
Right.
almost invisibly,
Yep.
to the richness of this area.
Yep.
And yet, I think you'd said before we started the interview and the camera started to roll that you acknowledge that newcomers bring some talent too.
Yeah.
And
No, I mean, our historical society here, a lot of the volunteers who are there preserving history are from other places. They've come here.
and that's interesting.
Right.
I mean, on the one hand, you'd say, well, they need something to do with their time, but on the other,
Yeah.
you would say, why would they pick
They could play golf or tennis.
and skip local history
Right.
to which they had no prior connection?
Right.
But that's good for them.
Yeah.
What's next in the life of Jeremy Jones?
So my big selling point on this book is that there are pictures. But in the process of finding those photos, I was in my grandmother's house sorting through this big tub. And as I was doing that, she pulled out this yellowed newspaper clipping and kind of held it above me and said, "Read this." And it was an article from the 1970s Asheville Citizen-Times. And so I read through it, and it described the diaries of this 19th century man that were recently discovered, that were written in code, and had been decoded by a former NSA analyst. But they mostly told the life of this man who was very sexually promiscuous. He had a wife, but he had a lot of other lovers. And so he'd written this log of his life in code. And I read through it, and I was like, wow, that's racy and interesting. And my grandmother said, "That's my great-great-grandfather." And I didn't believe her, because she had forgotten this newspaper clipping in the bin for 35, 40 years. But sure enough, I went and did the research, and it is my great-great-great-grandfather. So I tracked down a transcript of those diaries. The originals are in Raleigh, in the archive there at NC State. And I'm working on a book about those. It's called, at the moment, The Coded Life, because he was a fascinating character. I mean, he obviously was interesting for his sexual activity, but he also mined gold for about 20 years. He read Greek and Latin, but he was a farmer. He was mostly a kind of just below planter status. He helped make one of the first maps of Macon County, and there are just all these like algorithms and equations and bird migration charts in the diaries. So he was just a fascinating kind of Renaissance man in the 19th century. So I'm trying to work on a book about him and about his connection to me and about legacy and how these things get passed down.
My goodness, that sounds like it's going to make a great. You write so well. It sounds. How soon will you have that available?
It's a great question. My plan is to finish a draft this summer, so hopefully in the next couple of years it'll be out.
I'm always challenge to understand, because I do a certain amount of writing myself, how someone can say, I think I'll write a book next month. And it just doesn't come that easily, at least when you have to do that much research.
Right.
Are you writing this one in English or in code?
No, I'm the setup is I'm using his code to read my life, so I'm trying to. It's fascinating. The code supposedly is a lot like a code that Edgar Allan Poe uses in his short story *The Gold Bug*, but I don't think he was influenced by that. So it's interesting to see how codes were used in the 19th century.
You're teaching English at Western. What do you find in terms of, you're not quite at midlife yet, but approaching midlife. What do you find rewarding and what do you find frustrating in the students that you have these days who are in your classes learning to write? Yeah,
before coming to Western, I was teaching at a little university in Charleston, South Carolina, where we had a lot of first-generation college students. And I would say we have a lot at Western too. So for the last 7 years, I've been teaching a lot of students who are coming as the first members of their family to college. And that's a really rewarding experience because they may not have the skills or the preparation to know what to expect or to handle a college classroom, but they grow in leaps and bounds. And they have such pride in their work. And that's really great to be part of that experience. I'm starting to I felt like when I first started teaching, I was pretty close to them in age, and I'm starting to drift further and further away. And even though I use a lot of technology, I still am losing touch in that regard. So I had a moment a few years ago where I was telling them about a change in our syllabus on the calendar. And I looked up, and they all had their cell phones out. And my immediate response was, "What are you doing? Put your cell phones away." And they said, "Our calendars." And I realized that, of course, that's how they keep their calendars. There are no more scribbling down the changes to the calendar on the planner or whatever. So I'm starting to lose touch in terms of technology a bit.
And how about frustration? A little of that sometimes?
I think so, but I think it goes hand in hand with what I was saying in terms of reward. When we have a lot of first-generation students, they're overwhelmed because a lot of them are working. Some of them are working full-time jobs.
It's not easy being a student these days.
It's not. But I, of course, as a professor, like to think that my class is the only class and they should be doing my work. And so it's sometimes hard to keep them engaged and caught up when they have so many other things pulling them.
And yet you are working in a strong English department at Western.
Yeah, it's a great place to be. Some great writers there. Ron Rash and Pam Duncan are great fiction writers. And
Pam Duncan, Ron Rash, two of my absolute favorites.
Yeah. So it's not a bad group to be a part of.
Not a bad place to share your experience with.
Right.
Well, our experience with Jeremy B. Jones has been terrific. I want you to seriously consider Bear Wallow, a personal history of a mountain homeland. It's well worth your time. And it's been wonderful having you here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You are watching BRCC TV, the education channel.